Yeah, so it's a little bit of an aggressive intro, but all of us, when we start out, carve hair the wrong way. This is one of my first carvings ever. Look at the way that I represented the beard. What's the problem with it? It's flat. So that's what I'm going to help you guys avoid today. I was starting to get the right idea up here. I want to help you guys avoid the most common mistake, and we'll get into it with this carving. So you can see these eyes I did in a previous video. You can watch that video, I'll tag it. So the first thing that's really important to consider is the volume of the hair, right? The main shapes or masses of hair. Hair tends to group together because it has little hooks in it. So I'm going to start by taking the corners of this block off, and I'm going to kind of round the hair here. And I'm kind of thinking through what the hairstyle will be. Maybe I'll do a slick back hairstyle. This would be kind of a wood spirit hairstyle. I'll kind of define the forehead a little bit here. First thing I'm doing is defining where the head meets the hairline. Now, normally on a person with a good hairline or a normal hairline, you'd see it right at the turn of the head, and that just means where the head starts to turn back into the skull. So really, that's kind of my first focus, is defining that transition and making sure that the head kind of dips back in. It doesn't just go straight up and look like it's going into perpetuity forever more. So I'm going in with the knife and creating that hairline. I'm kind of creating a soft V here for the corners of the forehead meeting the hairline. And I can make a little stop cut indicating where it ends. And next, I really want to think again about the whole shape of the head. Now, it's going to vary depending on the person, but the point here remains the same. What is the hairstyle and where are the masses? So if I wanted to put, say a little bit of a part off to the side of this guy's head, I would do that now, very early on in the process. So I'll start by creating a V cut. I'm just going in with my knife, and I'm making a cut at one angle, and then I'm meeting that at an opposite angle going in. And I'll go back and forth until that chip falls out. And when it does, I'll move towards the back of the piece of wood. Now, this is just a 1x1x6 for those wondering, and it's basswood. And I'm using an 1 5/8" knife. I've been calling it 1.5 inches. It's actually 1 5/8". Close enough, right? So I'm going in with that V cut, and I'm creating that separation. I might just go a little deeper than that. You can actually even use a little bit of a slicing motion, but be very careful with that slicing motion. Sometimes it's easy to lose control of the blade when you're slicing. I'll carry that down to the hair root. And just like so, we've started to create two masses, right? This right side and his left side. So then I want to start to form the masses. Now, typically you're not going to have big flats on hair. You might have some flat areas along the length of the hair if it's long, but generally speaking, you're not going to have big blocky areas. So I'm going to start by kind of paying attention to what the shapes are and kind of just rounding them out ever so slightly. So I'm going in, rounding the back side of the head and taking the form and blocking it in. This is in the Vise method, where V stands for volume. Very important that we pay attention to where is the volume in the hairstyle. So then I'm kind of rounding the form. This has to do with the mass, and we call this a grouping of hair. This is one very big grouping of hair. We can parse it out in a little bit, and it really depends on the hairstyle. I have a little example here of the types of hairstyles that some people have, and this is kind of indicative of the way you approach hair. And this is actually a model from my carving school. I have multiple videos on carving hair, different types of hair: long hair, curly hair, straight hair, coily hair, all that. You can check out my school in the description below. There's over 120 videos there, and it varies from beginner, intermediate, to advanced projects with gouges, knives, and a lot of it focuses on the human face. Male, female, young and old portraits. So okay, I'm going in defining this side now. All right, and I'm going to really focus on paying attention to these two shapes, these two masses, and nothing more for now. Really dialing these in. I'm getting the big flat off the top of his head. And it's okay if there are some planes in it. If we're doing a more plain style of carving, a more kind of Scandinavian style, That's not a problem, but I do want to kind of get the blockiness out of the wood. So we've got the hair starting to flow a little bit. All right. Hair comes down, angles at the temples. So I'll do that. And, you know, on an older person, you might even think about taking the hairline back a little further than this. You can even kind of cheat up that line. Just make sure that you're making the head turn. Big mistake that I see people making when they start out, and this is a mistake that I made for years, especially when I was kind of rushing through a carving, is I didn't actually make the head turn back into the hairline. So it just looked too flat and it didn't look realistic. I just kind of overlooked it. Another mistake that beginners make, but a lot of intermediate carvers and even some advanced carvers make, I've seen them make the mistakes, but usually pro carvers don't make that mistake. Although I've seen some do that too. All right, so we've kind of got a crazy looking hairdo here, right? This is, I don't know, maybe this guy needs to see a different barber. I'm not gonna lie, but it's getting the point across. We can get him cleaned up at a better barber later, but just narrowing his head a little because it's starting to concern me the way that this hair is looking next to his face. But regardless, the next thing I want to do once I've defined these shapes is the eye in Vise, and that's intersection. And it's really important that when you're carving hair, once you've created these masses, that you pay attention to the intersection of the hair groupings. The subgroupings is what we're really looking at here. And it sounds fancy, but it's not. All I'm saying is to create layers and depth in hair, instead of just putting little lines, little tiny lines going all the way over one after another, parallel to one another, which is what most people do, I'm going to kind of use a few different shapes. The V shape, which I talked about, which is really important. Really simply put, I'll create a line here, and say at the opposite side I'll create another line. Right, so I've created a V shape. You can see that. Hopefully you can see it clearly enough. And then what I can do is I can actually carve the inside part of this V shape out, like so. And what have I done? What have I done? What have you done? I've created a V shape, right? And it's not exactly a very strict V shape. I can take the bottom of that V and kind of turn it, give it a little curl. But the point is that I've created some separation, right? And that's where that S in Vise, that's the next word, or letter, sorry, in Vise. So I can carry that down into the root. But this really creates some separation, and notice it's not just a straight line. I've curled back and I've opened it up so that there are now, instead of just one mass or two masses, there's a third mass hidden beneath this mass. This V kind of opened up a whole world of possibility by creating that V shape. So, that said, I can kind of continue to create some V shapes. Mistake you can make, cover the whole head in V's. That's not the answer, right? And sometimes you do an upside down V, and you know, there might be some incomplete aspects, you know, in talking about all of these shapes, because it's kind of a lot. But the gist of it's here. If you pay attention to separation and intersection of hair, so the way that these two groupings interact with one another, right? There's some separation between the two now, and it hides beneath it another layer. And that's very important to creating depth, to make it not look flat. So I can do that elsewhere here if I want to. I can create another V. But like I said, you can turn it upside down as well. So this V, instead of it facing this way, I might face the V the opposite way. So in other words, let's say, let's find a good example of where we can do that. Let's do this. Let's do one here. Here's an upside down V. So we're actually going to take a little section out of the hair here. Again, notice we're excavating two V cuts that meet one another, two cuts that meet one another. One, two equal but opposite directions, forming a kind of a widened V. And then moving down. Okay, and what I want to communicate about the Vise method, V-I-S-E, is the S is maybe one of the most important elements of this whole video. Why? Because, again, the mistake that beginners make, they make straight grooves one after another, and what we're looking for are these kind of meandering shapes, like S shapes. And you might say, yeah, well, what if he's got straight hair? Even so, even in straight hair, you're going to have these kind of soft S's, I call them, which maybe they're not as expressive as some of the wavy hair types are. You're still going to get a little bit of that kind of soft movement, right? That back and forth that you'd see in an S. Just kind of stretch that S out. If an S were made of string, you'd just pull on it a little tighter and it would straighten out. You still have that S profile, right? Maybe you can't see it. Let me see if I can make that a little more clear. You still have that S profile. There we go. There we go. Now we're carving. And that line we're way happier with that than we would be a straight line. So then we can do another one near it, or we can even use the V, tie the V into it. So in other words, I can come in and I can create another leg to this side and then push this down. And what does that create? A little bit of convergence of two groups. So V can be used to separate two groupings or combine two groupings to meet one another. Right? And this is a neat way that we can create intersection in the hair. So really the whole goal of this video is to teach you how to make groupings look more natural and less one-dimensional. Okay? So keep in mind, even now I'm forgetting the S, right? That looks kind of straight and it doesn't look great. It kind of looks stiff. So I'm going to add a little curve to it. Big mistake people make, just make things look way too flat, even with straight hair. Look at your straight-haired friend, or if you have straight hair, you'll see some natural wave in it for the most part, unless you've got really thick straight hair and it's very long and the weight pulls the hair down. Most of the time with shorter hair, you're going to see some movement anyway. Another mistake that people make when they're carving hair, aside from making the lines too straight, they like we mentioned earlier, they leave these flats in, and they make these patterns that are so obvious, right? Everything's equidistant, so you have to try to break up these patterns, in these flat spots. These patterns are very important to avoid, because when you do things that are too patterned, it doesn't look natural anymore. So I'm kind of breaking up these groupings because I started to do that a little bit. It's a mistake that all of us make because human beings were pattern making beings. But look, already from a little bit of a distance, we haven't gotten any detail in here yet, but we started to separate these groupings, and it's starting to look like hair. Granted, this guy's got a forehead about, well, I guess it's a 5 head they call it, right? So I can bring that hairline down. He's got a pompadour is what he's got. Wow. Well, guys, I never called myself a hairstylist, right? And for good reason. Look at that. Even though I got in an argument with my wife once because I told her that I could cut her hair, and she didn't think I could. And I told her that I carved hair all day long, and so I could probably figure out how to cut it. And well, let me just say this: it was a lot harder than I thought it was. Cutting hair is totally different than carving it. But we ended up doing a pretty decent job. All right, I digress. Back in with some of these shapes. The E shape in Vise, I typically like to think of it as kind of a curl. A lowercase e kind of curls in on itself, right? If we were to draw, lowercase e, you can kind of picture that kind of, upside down E, or, obviously if we orient it correctly, it's going to be like that, right? Oh my gosh, I did it backwards. I had a dyslexic moment. That's crazy. But either way, that's the shape that we're looking for, right? Any of these shapes, it can be upside down, backwards, inside out. But usually we're going to see these kind of curly cues on curlier hair, right? So the E is not quite as commonly seen in straighter hair. Wow, I guess the lack of sleep from having a child is catching up with me. I don't think I've ever written well, maybe since the first grade, written a letter backwards. That was fun. Glad I caught that on camera. All right. So anyway, I'm gonna get off here in just a bit because there's a lot here to talk about, and we don't have a lot of time. But here's the idea, right? We just keep going with some of these parallel lines, Make sure they're S-shaped. This is kind of hard for those of you beginner carvers to work on. So if you have a V tool or a veiner, sometimes that can help, right? So that looks like using a U-shaped gouge. This is a 1.5 millimeter gouge. So you can go in, and sometimes that makes it a little easier to make these S shapes. So if you have the money, pony up a few bones and get yourself a veiner that'll really help your whittling, your carving. In the carving school, we have all different projects, but a lot of them use different levels of gouges. So if you're a beginner, it only may include a few little gouges or none. But if you're an intermediate or an advanced carver, we add more tools to the description, because these tools can really help you to make realistic stuff more efficiently. Okay, and finally, last mistake you want to avoid is over detailing the hair. It's more important that you have these masses, these forms carved in properly, than it is you get all of these tiny little intricate details in the hair. Okay, and as the hair starts to move away from the origin, from the root, you can start to create more separation between the groupings. So I might make a little bit deeper of a cut at this outside edge than I will at the root of the hair. And that's going to make the hair look like it's separating as it moves away from its origin, because that's often the case. Even though those little barbules carry or hold the hairs together, they tend to separate a bit as they move apart from one another. Or as they sort of move away from the root. That's what I meant. Redundant. Okay, so that's the idea. I just wanted to show you a few little tips. And of course I could carve this hair and really detail the heck out of it, and it's going to take a while. I don't want to belabor this any more than I need to. But anyway, that said, if you guys want to see full videos on carving hair and some of the techniques that I use to carve curly hair, even coily hair, wavy hair and straight hair, or different types of short hairstyles, right? Medium length, wavy, medium hair, bald guys, stuff like that. You can check all that out and many more project videos, carving beards, carving all kinds of types of faces, portraits in the school below. But thanks again for watching, guys, and per usual, take your vitamins. Bye.